The current reform of the EU's Common Fisheries Policy started in 2009 and is now in its final stages.
We need to adapt to the change of the marine resources. Otherwise, we are not going to survive. Our fishermen are not going to survive, our fisheries sector is not going to survive, and of course, we'll have no more Commissioner for Maritime Affairs and Fisheries.
To address these challenges, the EU Commission proposes a mandatory introduction of transferable fishing concessions, TFCs, in all member states. TFCs are also known as ITQs, individual transferable quotas. The ITQ system is a management system in which quotas are allocated to individual fishermen or vessels, and where the quotas can afterwards be leased, sold and bought. In Denmark, the ITQ system was introduced in 2005 as a response to the poor economic performance in the sector and to rebuild diminished fishing stocks. The Danish Minister for Food, Agriculture and Fisheries, Mette Gjerskov, hasn't made up her mind yet. Is mandatory ITQs the way forward for EU fisheries?
Det noget, vi diskuterer også politisk, om hvad vej er det egentlig, vi skal gå fremad. Og der er jeg jo mest optaget af, at vi sørger for, at fiskeriet bliver så bæredygtigt som muligt, at det bliver med så lidt klimapåvirkning som muligt, så lidt miljøpåvirkning som muligt, og med så stor økonomi som muligt. Og jeg må jo anerkende, at også med de her kvoter har givet en bedre økonomi for dem, der er tilbage.
The introduction of the ITQs also introduced a race for quota. It exploded already before the system was actually in place.
Tilpasning af kapaciteten, reduktion af udsmid, leasing af fisk, det tror jeg ikke, der er nogen, der har bestridt, at det fungerer eksemplarisk i Danmark.
Society should have the luxury of debating, not being presented with the specter of what I call privatize or perish messages.
Many abbreviations are floating over the waters this year. MSY, TAC, CQM, and now also the TFCs or ITQs, individual transferable quotas. They're all meant to be means to the same end, a more sustainable fishery in the EU. But there is one letter that needs a little more attention. It's the T in ITQ. It stands for transferable. It's this new aspect, T for transferable, that's the radical newcomer in the intense debate on fisheries management. This short film will take us a little bit deeper into the T. What happened in the Danish fisheries after the government introduced the ITQ system and gave away the quotas to private enterprises and fishermen?
Der er blevet færre fartøjer, de er blevet større, og de er blevet mere effektive, de er blevet dyrefinansieret. Det er sket. Og det er sket for den demersale flåde. Det pelagiske fiskeri, det er sild og makrel. Den fanger du i kæmpe store net på en gang, og så pumper du det hele ombord. Noget af det fanger du i Nordatlanten. Der er der sket en endnu kraftigere koncentration. Der er sket en decideret koncentration fra et meget stort antal fartøjer til et meget lille, stærkt specialiseret fartøjer, som godt kan have værdier for fartøjet og fangstmængderne på 800 millioner, måske helt op til en milliard kroner. Det er sådan set et resultat af den her regulering, og det har i virkeligheden været et ønsket eller et tilsigtet resultat, der er kommet ud af det.
The economists say and tell us and try to convince us that the quotas end up in the hands of those who are the most fit to utilize the stocks. We disagree with that for a simple reason that it has nothing got to do with wise utilization, whether you have access to money or not.
In Iceland, the ITQ system was put in place back in 1990 with the following effects. The quotas got a price. The price was transformed into capital, and the private capital found its way out to the rest of the world as collateral. According to the two acclaimed Icelandic scientists, Anna Karlsdottir and Carl Benediktsson, some of the consequences for the Icelandic fisheries were that in 2007, 52% of the ITQs were controlled by just 10 of the largest quota holders. 428 Icelandic fishing businesses closed down between 2003 and 2007, and 60% of fisheries related to jobs in the country disappeared. The quota trading was an important factor in blowing up the Icelandic economic bubble, and according to the scientists, it worked directly as a short-term capital injection into the speculation economy. In a television interview late in 2007, the main ideologue of the Icelandic political right talked about the Icelandic economic miracle.
Við virkjuðum fjármagn sem áður lá dautt og við gerðum það á tveimur sviðum. Í fyrsta lagi voru fiskistofnarnir verðlausir áður fyrr. Þeir voru óframseljanlegir, óveðhæfir, óseljanlegir. Síðan kvótum úthlutað og þá verður til fjármagn þetta. Hitt atriðið var að ríkisfyrirtækin, þau lágu mitt dauð. Þetta var fjármagn sem var óframseljanlegt.
Einhvers staðar að hljóta samt sem að þessi peningar hafa komið?
Nei, vegna þess að ef þú ert með land þar sem að fjármagnið ekki í höndunum á neinum, þar sem að enginn getur notað það, þar sem það liggur bara dautt, þá vex það ekki. En hér á Íslandi þá var það fært í hendunar á eigendum, gert skrásett og veðhæft og þá fór það að vaksa og þá var það lifnað allt við. Og síðan þriðja sem olli
Since then, the Icelandic fisheries companies have accumulated astonishingly high debts. In July 2009, they were estimated to be at least 550 billion Icelandic krona, or more than a third of the GDP in 2008. Many Danish fishermen talk about the usefulness of the ITQ system on a daily basis.
Så kan vi se, hvordan det er. Vi havde totalt på år snart 30.000 kilo. Og vi har landet 2700 kilo. Og så har vi lejet 22 tons ud. Og afslutningsvis vil det bare sige, at sådan som reguleringen er hjemme ved os i Danmark, så vil vi ikke kunne undvære.
Det er dag-til-dag tilpasningen. Der kommer en fisker ud, og han har noget blandet fiskeri, så fanger han måske nogle torsk. Han har ikke nogen torskekvote. I det tidligere system, der var det et lovgivning, han skulle smide torsken ud. I dag kan han sejle land, han kan lande torsken, så kan han gå ind på internettet og sige, jeg skal lige lease en mængde torsk her for den her måned. Og den leaser jeg ind til mit fiskeri, så behøver jeg ikke smide ud, så er jeg dækket ind, og så har min kvote passet sammen med fangsterne.
The story is that this is about discard, so if you catch some fish, you don't have quota for it, you will lease in quota. But my research shows it's much different from that. People plan the year leasing in 50%, sometimes 100% of what they fish through a year. They don't have rights, but they lease, and people speculate in the leasing prices. So they see, okay, now the cod fishing is good, so they'll put up the price a bit. At the end of the year, because they have surplus quota, the price will go down. So it's more like a financial system than it's natural production. The rights are now owned by the big companies who lease them back out to the young new guys, to the old guys. So you see a concentration of rights and then people leasing out.
Formelt set er det jo ikke, legalt set er det jo ikke en property right på den måde, men hvis man ser på også hvordan forventningerne er til, hvordan det her system vil fungere, så er der ingen, der forventer, at der bliver radikale ændringer i det her system. Så derfor, selvom juridisk set det ikke er en egentlig property right, og at staten kan tage det tilbage, så bliver det de facto i finansiel henseende betragtet som en property right.
Once you give them away under the privatization model, and you want to change direction, you know that the people that have them are going to start demanding compensation if you wanted to go in a different direction.
I Danmark vil vi ikke have det, som han kaldte slipperskippers. Altså, i Danmark sørger fiskeriloven for en eksklusiv stilling, hvis jeg må sige det på den måde, for det er jo virkelig en eksklusivitet, at de, der er registrerede fiskere, det er dem, der skal drive fiskeriet, og når de driver fiskeriet, så er det ikke nok, at de siger, at vi driver det, for vi har altid været fiskere, men nu er vi holdt op, og vi lejer vores kvoter ud. De skal selv være aktive og være aktive i fiskeriet.
What we can see now is that every time fishing rights are for sale, the large companies are able to offer a higher price than the small operators. Not because they're better fishers or more efficient and make more money, but because they have advantages in the financial market.
Most of us agree that speculation in natural resources is a bad thing, and the European Commission is now talking about introducing measures to avoid speculation.
And here's a passage that's in the non-paper from the Commission. In designing the system, member states and stakeholders must therefore take care that the TFC system leaves no room for speculations. This is like wishing for Christmas in July. I mean, that's close to being dangerously naive. These programs unleash speculation. They're built on speculation. That's what the leasing market is all about. And this is where I said you're playing with fire here. If you want to try and contain it, you've got to do something different than put in optimistic, sort of wish-for language like that. Thank you.
Just a small example from Denmark. The HM45, a boat of this type, was bought as new for €5,300 in September 2007 by a Danish fisheries company. It sold the vessel on January 22, 2008 to a consortium. The price was now 9 times higher at €49,300. 3 weeks later, on February 13, 2008, the HM45 was bought back by its initial owner. The price had now reached €4 million, or more than 800 times its value just 5 months earlier. Now back to reality. What happened to the coastal fishing communities in Denmark after the introduction of ITQ in 2005?
Since 2005, we've seen 35 harbors lose their commercial fishing activity, and another 35 have half the amount of vessels that they had in 2005. So this has had severe impact.
We have these examples where quotas have been sold out of small coastal communities, and all of a sudden these communities who based their very being on utilizing fishing grounds close by are all of a sudden robbed of the possibility to utilize those fishing grounds. And this is one of the very dark side of the ITQ system.
What we've seen the last few years is a shift from gill nets to trawling. It's especially in some areas, the amount of fish caught by trawl is now the double as it was earlier. And more or less in every catch area, we see an increase of trawling.
Pour avoir une pêche durable, il faut plusieurs choses. Il faut avant tout favoriser et développer, mais non de façon industrielle, mais de façon durable, les petits métiers. Il faut quelque part, je ne suis pas pour arrêter totalement les pêcheries industrielles, parce que des gens vivent de ça, mais par contre, il faut stopper l'évolution. Il faut stopper la croissance, l'accroissement du nombre de bateaux industriels, de l'avancée des kilowatts, l'augmentation des motorisations avec un prix de gazole qui augmente. Ce n'est pas viable.
But are there any alternatives when we want to stop overexploitation?
I think you could still do a system like that where you had public leasing for various size classes of vessel, gear types if you wanted to. I mean, these are all detailed social and political decisions, and I don't have any problem with that. I think a lot of mainstream economists don't like that at all. They say, oh, that's social engineering. Well, all fishery management is social engineering, and we're human beings trying to create systems that do what we want them to do.
Man kunne godt lave forskellige afgiftssystemer. Det vil være meget kompliceret at lave et afgiftssystem samtidig med, at man lavede det her. Det vil også være meget kompliceret at lave et leasingsystem, hvor staten lige pludselig tog alle fisken fra de fiskere, som har investeret i et fartøj og hele deres tilværelse på det, og sagde, nu tager vi fisken, og så må I byde ind på, hvor meget I kan gøre det her. Det vil have uoverskuelige konsekvenser.
An ITQ system is, to my mind, not really an fishery management system. I believe that it is much more of a business model.
Vores design er rigtig godt. Det er det. Går det lidt galt, eller er der nogen, der får mere eller mindre, eller sådan noget der, så kan du gå ind og justere på tingene. Det er et skide godt design.
Det er bedst, at staten blander sig mindst muligt. Fordi at det her, det er jo også noget, markedet skal være med til at udvikle. Men jeg er fuldstændig enig i, at vi har jo ansvar. Altså det er jo politikerne, der har ansvaret for, hvordan dansk fiskeri ser ud i dag. Og noget er det godt, og noget er det rigtig skidt. Bare se discardproblemerne.
The general pattern around the world with these programs is that you give the tradable quota to some initial recipients effectively forever. They don't use the word forever, they'll say indefinitely or something like that. And then they can sell them and lease them. And many, many places in the world, they are leasing them, meaning they're not actually fishing. The people that are actually fishing are leasing, so they're paying. But they're paying the lucky few that were gifted with these quotas. And you might as well just cut the middlemen out and lease directly to the fishermen. And then society would be getting the return. So I don't think anybody's forced decision makers to face that question and say, how do you pass the red face test of giving away public wealth? When you can show that you could achieve exactly the same results without doing that.